Back in 1986, the world was introduced to a story that changed the way people looked at superheroes. Miller's The Dark Knight Returns told the story of a 55-year-old Batman coming out of retirement to fight crime once again in a world where superheroes were either retired or dead. The tone was gritty and violent, turning Batman into a gritty, no-holds-barred vigilante. Over the next 2 decades, Miller wrote prequels and sequels, extending the arc to include new characters like Robin and Justice Leaguers in a universe of its own called Earth 31. This is the story of Miller's entire Earth 31 saga told chronologically. We start with Batman Year 1. Chapter 1, Who I Am and How I Came to Be. The story starts on January 4th on a train. James Gordon is on a crowded train coming into Gotham City. A woman breastfeeds her baby next to him. It's been a 12-hour journey and he hasn't eaten. A frowning Gordon looks out the window with despair. Gotham City. Maybe it's all I deserve now, he thinks. Maybe it's just my time in hell. A train is no way to come to Gotham, and he decides his wife Barbara will be flying in, no matter how much it costs, because from an aeroplane, all you'd see are streets and buildings that fool you into thinking it's civilized. Meanwhile, a flight makes its final descent to Gotham City with 25-year-old Bruce Wayne on board, whose thoughts are exactly the opposite. I should have taken the train. I should be closer to the ground, he thinks. I should see the enemy. As Gordon gets off the train, the crowd of travelers on the platform reinforces his thoughts. This is no place to raise a family, he thinks, secretly hoping that his wife's pregnancy test comes out negative. He's met by a towering Detective Flass, who's come to welcome him to Gotham and take him to meet Commissioner Loeb. Flass roughly shoves away a hooker and welcomes Gordon, telling him that Gotham is not as bad as it looks, especially for cops. Bruce Wayne, on the other hand, is met by a crowd of reporters and television crews quizzing him on everything from his romantic liaisons to his plans now that he's back in town after 12 years abroad. As Bruce merely waves and walks on without any comments, the newscaster moves on to other news where a key witness's disappearance has forced the district attorney to withdraw a case against the commissioner. Gordon's meeting with the commissioner is brief, with Gordon admitting that he's made mistakes and that he's grateful for a second chance here in Gotham. The commissioner stresses the need for team spirit and commends him by saying that all that matters is that whatever his mistakes were, they were kept away from the media. Partnered with Detective Flass, Gordon starts his patrol duties around town. Flass is a bully who uses excessive force without reason. Gordon doesn't approve but says nothing, observing the combat style and memorizing his moves for future reference, noting that Flass must have had Green Beret training. A month goes by and Flass tries to tell Gordon to soften his approach to disciplining fellow police officers, even hinting that it may not be the best thing to do given that Barbara is pregnant. But Gordon ignores him. Having failed to soften Gordon with words, Flass tells the commissioner that he's going to have to get physical now. Loeb agrees, but tells him to wait till he's out of town so that Flass's actions can't be connected to him. Bruce Wayne, meanwhile, has been training at home, not quite feeling ready yet to fight crime. His frustration is building as he knows he has the skills but feels that something's missing, but doesn't know what it is. It's March before he decides to go out into the city for his first reconnaissance mission. He's prepared his alibi and makes himself anonymous with a little makeup and a change of clothes into streetwear. He knows he's not ready to fight yet and will need to avoid combat. Bruce starts with a walk through the East End, one of the most crime-ridden areas of Gotham. The potential muggers, the prostitutes, the pimps, the cheap motels, the homeless. He takes it all in. And even though he knows he should avoid fights, he provokes a pimp over an underage girl and fights him in full view of the public, getting stabbed in the leg by one of the girls who also joins the fight, seeing him as a threat but not enough to be afraid of him. A prostitute in leather tights jumps in to fight him, and he recognizes that though she's not as good as him, he's had martial arts training. Even as he knocks her down, the cops arrive and seeing him as a troublemaker, one of them opens fire, hitting an artery. Having passed out from blood loss, Bruce wakes up sometime later to find himself cuffed in the back of the patrol car, still bleeding, with the cops deciding whether they should take him to a hospital. He escapes by snapping the chains and attacking the cops, causing the car to swerve into a truck and overturn, catching fire. He pulls the unconscious officers to safety and makes his way back to his car, hoping he can still drive back home. The same night, Flass and some cops jump Gordon in the parking lot, beating him just enough to keep him out of the hospital. Even though they're wearing masks, Gordon recognizes Flass's voice. They leave and Gordon picks himself up. He finds Flass at a poker party and waits for him to leave, following in his car. He runs Flass off the road and fights him hand to hand, doing just enough to keep Flass out of the hospital, and leaves him naked and cuffed by the side of the road. He knows the humiliation will keep Flass from reporting him, and it'll keep Flass away from his wife. He realizes now what it takes to be a cop in Gotham City. Bruce Wayne has made it home. He's sitting in the study with its large windows in the moonlight, bleeding out but refusing to call for Alfred to patch him up. He's waited 18 years to ready himself to take on the criminal element in Gotham, but he still doesn't know how to make them afraid. Speaking to a bust of his father, he tells him that he's run out of patience and would rather die than wait any longer. Without warning, a bat crashes through the window, reminding him of his childhood fear of them. The chapter ends with turning points for two heroes. Gordon has realized what it takes to be a cop in Gotham City, and Bruce Wayne has realized what he needs to become to strike fear. Chapter 2. War is declared. It's early April and James Gordon is on his way to work on a rainy morning when he gets a call from work about a hostage situation involving children. He hears the name Brandon over the radio and swerves onto the sidewalk to get ahead of the traffic. Brandon heads the SWAT team and has a reputation for uncalled-for violence. Brandon and his lunatic Gestapo, he thinks as he floors the gas. It'll be a massacre. He makes it just in time to stop the SWAT team from going in and takes over the case. The man at the window is holding a gun to a child's head. Gordon puts his gun down on the street and walks in, unarmed. He hopes his pregnant wife isn't watching it on the news, but he knows that she probably is. Thinking of the scared little girl in the window, he takes the stairs up and quickly subdues the armed man. While the media celebrate him as a hero, Gordon's colleagues, including the commissioner, are itching for a chance to get rid of him. If it weren't for the press, he would have been forced out of service. 4 months in, Gordon hates the job and the city. How can I bring an innocent child to life in a city without hope, he wonders. Meanwhile, a costumed Bruce Wayne makes his first appearance as Batman, foiling a burglary in a high-rise. The suit works better than he expected as the thieves freeze in terror, causing one of the thieves to nearly fall to his death, but Batman manages to save him. Gordon starts getting reports of the vigilante dressed as a bat. He notes there have been 78 acts of assaults in 5 weeks. Not given to urban legends of a monster bat, Gordon has analyzed the crimes and noted patterns of timing and methods used. As he briefs his team, he acknowledges the vigilante as a person of extraordinary physical skill who's been working his way up from junkie muggers to pushers to suppliers. He points out that this includes any cops that might have been helping the process, taking a subtle dig at Flass, who's seated in a neck brace and an arm in a sling. Flass makes up a story about a tip he received and how he was about to single-handedly apprehend the felons when a giant bat creature with a 30-foot wingspan flew down from the sky and attacked them. He describes Batman as a creature that's immune to bullets and has claws that fly out to paralyze the felons and then single Flass out for a beating. The team laughs at the visibly embarrassed fellow detective. Another month goes by before Batman makes his first big move. The mayor is hosting a dinner for his associates that includes Gotham's commissioner, councilman, and a head of organized crime in the city. Batman's had an effect on all their interests, both good and bad. Batman stealthily makes his way into the compound, taking out the guards and setting up equipment for the theatrics he's planned. He waits for the right moment and cuts out the lights. He throws a smoke grenade into the room, shattering a window. As the smoke clears up, an explosion takes out the large garden window, and as the terrified guests look on, he emerges against a pool of light with a warning, "From this moment on, none of you are safe." Shaken by the threat, the commissioner puts pressure on Gordon to take down Batman. The GCPD try their best. They stage fake crimes to lure the vigilante and quiz potential suspects. But none of it sticks, and the Batman continues his war on crime. Among the suspects is Harvey Dent. The district attorney would have a genuine reason and possibly the physical strength to become a vigilante. Gordon quizzes Harvey on his whereabouts on particular dates, and as he leaves, he doesn't notice Batman slipping out from behind Harvey's desk, confirming that he and the DA are now friends. As Gordon starts to drive away with his new attractive colleague, Detective Sarah Essen, a runaway truck hurtles down the street. Batman is on the rooftop, and both he and Gordon notice that it's heading for an old woman hauling a trolley across the road. They both rush to save the woman, with Gordon jumping onto the truck in an attempt to take the wheel, and Batman tackling the woman, pushing her to safety at the last moment. Knocked out by the crash, Gordon comes to and sees Essen holding a gun on Batman, the vigilante they've been looking for. As Batman gets away from Essen, backup patrol cars arrive. Thinking that Batman attacked Gordon, they open fire, and Batman catches a bullet in the leg as he's chased into a blind alley where he breaks into an abandoned building marked for demolition. Gordon realizes that Batman risked himself to save the woman and gives orders to surround the building, intent on going in to make an arrest. Not willing to risk Batman getting away, the commissioner overrides Gordon and sends in Brandon. The chapter closes with the SWAT team firebombing the building, even as Batman is trying to get out. Chapter 3. Black Dawn. The story picks up from the close of the last chapter, and we see Batman falling down a stairwell as the building burns around him. The building was abandoned and marked for demolition, but there were a few homeless men who had sought shelter. He sees them burn and scream, but it's too late to help them. Scrambling, he finds a metal trapdoor and rushes to pick the lock in the hope that it could lead to a shelter from the fire. As the fires die down, Gordon looks on helplessly as the SWAT team goes in with orders to take no prisoners. The team splits up into units and goes from floor to floor, checking each one methodically. Brandon Brandon's unit finds the trapdoor with the busted lock and chain leading to the basement. 4 of them, including Brandon, go in to check it out but find the room deserted. Just as they're about to go back up, Batman slams the trapdoor shut above them. We see Batman has already knocked out the remaining 2 men and pushed a heavy beam on the trapdoor to keep it shut. Outside, when it's apparent that Batman has taken out an entire SWAT unit, Gordon holds his men back from assisting the SWAT team, citing his previous orders. He's enjoying the show at Brandon's expense. Commissioner Loeb himself comes to the scene in a chopper to see the vigilantes end. He's ensured that the very best snipers are on the rooftops, just waiting for more light. It's almost dawn, and Batman knows he'll lose his cover soon. As the 2 other SWAT units come down, he hides under a staircase and takes stock of his weapons. He's down to a blowgun with 3 darts and an ultrasonic tone emitter in the heel of his boot. He turns on the emitter and arms the blowgun. The darts are specially tipped with enough anesthetic to put a man to sleep. Brandon manages to climb out of the chimney from the basement, and Batman quickly puts him down with a dart. Breaking cover, he runs through the lobby as the remaining men open fire. He does the math. 12 men and thousands of bullets. The numbers aren't on his side, and even though he's fast, he gets shot in the arm. Batman takes cover behind a pillar that's holding up what's left of the ceiling. He's getting weaker by the second as he loses more blood. As the SWAT team closes in for the kill, Batman gets up and kicks the pillar with everything he's got, breaking it and bringing the roof down on them all as he dives out of the way. Before the dust settles, he starts taking out the SWAT team one by one, even throwing one man through the wall to the crowd that's gathered outside. As the sun rises, Gordon turns to see a shadow across the sun. He sees thousands of bats flying down from above. They're homing in on the signal from Batman's boot. The crowd is screaming as people try to find shelter from the sudden onslaught of bats. In the confusion, Batman steals a police motorcycle and escapes under the cover of bats. It's the middle of the year, and Gordon continues his investigation into the identity of the vigilante with Sarah Essen. His prime suspect is Bruce Wayne, a man with the money and, given the manner of his parents' death, the motive to become a vigilante. He tries to meet him, but is told by Alfred that Bruce had a skiing accident in Switzerland and would be back only next month. On the other side of town, a prostitute in the East End called Selina, who has a penchant for cats, decides to change her line of work to burglary. Meanwhile, Gordon finds himself getting attracted to Sarah, and the two kiss one evening after work. He's racked with guilt over his feelings for Essen, while his relationship with his pregnant wife Barbara continues to deteriorate. The chapter closes with Gordon thinking about Batman and his duty as an officer of the law. He's a criminal. I'm a cop. It's that simple. But I'm a cop in a city where the mayor and the commissioner of police use cops as hired killers. Chapter 4. Friend in Need. It's September. On the personal front, Gordon is in love with Sarah, but they both know it can't last, and Essen has put in for a transfer out of Gotham. It's the only thing to do, he thinks. On the professional front, Gordon continues to make the news for taking down criminals. Batman's partnership with Harvey Dent has taken a new turn, with Batman scaring high-level criminals into making confessions and naming names. This time, it's a well-known narcotics dealer called Jefferson Skeevers who surrenders himself to Gordon and names Detective Flass as a collaborator. Knowing that the commissioner would kill the case, Gordon breaks protocol and informs Internal Affairs himself. Loeb tells him that if he doesn't fall in line, his wife Barbara will be informed of his affair with Essen, showing him a photograph of them kissing, leaving a shaken Gordon to choose between his relationship with his wife and Flass. Gordon finally gets his meeting with Bruce Wayne at Wayne Manor, and he takes Barbara along. Bruce plays up his millionaire playboy image and has his alibis ready. As they're driving out of the manor, Gordon stops the car and confesses his affair with Sarah to his wife, having made his mind up not to be blackmailed by the commissioner and go after Flass. It's mid-October when Gordon becomes a father. The case against Flass is going well, with Skeevers willing to testify despite an attempt on his life. In other news, there's been an uptick in daring cat burglaries, with the latest victim being Loeb himself. Loeb blames Batman for the crime, and Selina is offended at the vigilante being credited for it. She decides her next target will be Roman, one of the heads of organized crime in Gotham, and tells her friend that she'll also scratch his face so that she won't be mistaken for Batman. Selina gets to the mobster's villa, not knowing that Batman is already there, eavesdropping on Roman having a conversation with his nephew Johnny. But before they can finish the conversation, Selina is spotted by the guards and Roman rushes outside. Noting the cat costume, Roman exclaims that she must be working for Batman and tells his guards to take her alive. Batman saves her by knocking out Roman and the guards with darts. As he leaves, he tells her she's wasting his time. Selina is taken aback by the encounter, but takes the opportunity to scratch Roman's face before she too leaves. Back at Wayne Manor, Bruce listens to the conversation he recorded at the villa, trying to decode Roman's intentions. In the meantime, A recovering Roman tells Johnny to kidnap Gordon's baby. Gordon gets a call from the commissioner late one night calling him in to work on a small case that could have been handled by anyone else. Loeb informs Roman that Gordon is leaving the apartments, and as Gordon drives out, a lone motorcyclist rushes past him, going into his building's garage. Not recognizing the rider, Gordon realizes the late-night call was to get him out and that his wife and baby are the target. Turning the car around, he goes back into the garage but can't see the motorcyclist or the rider. A baby cries out, and Gordon sees Johnny in a car holding his baby and a knife. His wife is also being forced in by two other men. Johnny tells him to drop the gun and go to the office. Gordon knows he can't let them go and fires at the men. Gordon shoots one of the guards but takes a bullet in the shoulder himself. His wife gets away, but Johnny drives away with the baby. A motorcycle starts behind him, and Gordon turns to see the mystery biker gunning the engine. Suspecting him to be one of Roman's men, Gordon shoots the rider, knocking him off the bike. He tells Barbara to call the cops and gets on the motorcycle, taking off after Johnny, almost knocking down a bicyclist at the exit. As Gordon leaves, the mystery biker gets up and removes his helmet. Barbara's holding a gun on him. It's Bruce, his face hidden by the shadows of the garage. He tells her to trust him and that he won't let her boy die. Barbara holds the gun on him but doesn't fire as he runs out of the parking lot to chase after Gordon. Bruce exits the garage and snatches the cycle away from the still shaken bicyclist to chase after Gordon and Johnny. Gordon catches up to Johnny on a bridge and fires at the wheels, causing the car to swerve and crash into the steel girders, crumpling the front. Gordon gets off the bike and, gun in hand, rushes to the car. As Gordon reaches the doors of the car, Johnny opens it, slamming him against the girder as his gun and spectacles go flying. Johnny lunges towards him, holding the baby in one hand and a knife in another. Johnny and Gordon fight, and neither of them notes the arrival of Bruce, who leaps into the girders above. As they fight, Johnny lets go of the baby, which falls toward the water below, and Bruce dives after it. Gordon sees his baby fall and pulls Johnny backwards over the edge. The three of them fall toward the water, with Bruce reaching for the baby. Barbara reaches the bridge and runs to the side looking down as she hears the cries of her baby. Johnny lies unmoving in the mud. A mud-covered Bruce hands the crying baby gently over to Gordon. There are sirens in the distance, and Gordon looks at Bruce, telling him that he's practically blind without his glasses and that he'd better leave before the cops get there. The story ends with Gordon standing on a rooftop alone in the snow. He's been promoted to captain now. As he lights his pipe, he thinks about his latest case. Someone who calls himself the Joker has threatened to poison the Gotham reservoir, and Gordon is waiting for a friend who might be able to help. Next in the Earth 31 series is Superman Year 1. Superman Year 1, Book 1. Like all Superman origin stories, this one too begins with the destruction of the planet Krypton. This time, however, it's told from the perspective of the baby Kal, which is Superman's Kryptonian name. He sees his parents rushing to him amid explosions, wrapping him in a red blanket and placing him in the rocket ship his father has been building for months. Through his eyes, we see his journey through the stars as he sleeps and wakes almost endlessly till he sees the bright blue planet his father had promised. The ship crashes with baby Kal still inside and asleep. He wakes up to his father's voice on the ship's automated systems telling him that there's a world out there that he needs to save. You have many labors to perform. The voice informs him, a world needs to be saved from itself. Rise and meet your destiny. Kal pushes on the cockpit ceiling as it opens with a hiss and gets his first smells and sounds of rural Kansas on his new home planet. Sunlight permeates down into the small crater his ship has made while landing, and he can see a man standing there next to a pickup truck. He steps out, still wrapped in his blanket, and walks toward the man. The son of Krypton has arrived. One journey ended and an adventure began. Kal puts his arms out to the stranger, who picks him up, telling him that everything's going to be all right. The man is Jonathan Kent, a young farmer. The man notes that the baby is as heavy as an engine block. As the baby looks at him, Kent feels something probe inside his skull. It's a gentle warmth that makes him feel like his brain is floating. The baby coos with pleasure and thinks, this is not a hostile. Let him take you to your new home. Let him think this is all his idea. John takes baby Kal home to his wife Martha, telling her that he came out of a rocket that dropped out of the sky, and Martha accepts the baby as heaven sent, and they name him Clark. As Kal grows, he constantly learns not just about the new world, but also about his own abilities, learning to temper his strength at every stage, from learning to ride on his pa's shoulders without hurting his neck, to tossing a ball softly enough to not injure his father. He grows in strength and new powers develop, surprising both him and his parents. Some abilities, like flying, he loves. Others, like super hearing, keep him from getting a decent night's sleep. High school is the first time we see young Clark interact with people other than his parents. His friends are the underdogs who get bullied, with Clark standing up for them and protecting them. Stories of him make the rounds. His father has told him not to show off, but Clark enjoys the attention like any other kid his age. He's been careful about not hurting any of the bullies too badly, but they don't let up. Change the world for the better just by being there, Jonathan tells him. Clark ponders this and notes that his fighting hasn't solved the problem. The bullies even have the teachers too scared to interfere. He makes friends with his neighbor, Lana Lang, a classmate he has a crush on. She tells him to approach the cops with pictures that she's taken of the bullying, evidence that can't be ignored. Their conversation, however, is overheard by one of the bullies, who then turns up at Lana's place, and the gang assaults her just as Clark gets there to save her. In what's probably the first time Clark shares his true superpowered self with someone outside of his parents, he takes Lana and flies her back home. As he leaves, he tells her he won't keep any secrets from her, and the two start dating. As high school comes to an end, Clark tells Jonathan that he's decided he wants to see the world and has enlisted in the Navy. As he says goodbye to his parents, Martha stuffs something into his pack, telling him she made it for him from the sheets he was packed in back when he fell out of the sky. The issue closes with Clark getting off the bus at Great Lakes Naval Station, ready for new challenges and a new adventure. Book 2. The second issue starts with Clark training as a naval cadet and holding back to keep people from seeing what he can do. But his trainers notice his extraordinary skill at the shooting range and transfer him to a naval base along the Pacific Ocean for training as a Navy SEAL. He sees an ocean for the first time and loves it. He feels the sea calling to him. Then, late one night, as Clark stands looking out over the ocean, he hears the sounds of women laughing and singing on the horizon. His supervision lets him see there are mermaids on the horizon, a fact that's immediately confirmed by his CO. The CO goes on to warn him that men had gone sea crazy looking at them and would jump in after them, with most never making it back. Ignoring the warning, Clark sneaks out one night when he hears the mermaids singing a sad song and swims into the ocean. He discovers he can breathe the water and dives deeper toward the mermaids, who speak to him telepathically. One of them, called Laurie, beckons to him, and Clark follows her, finding himself in the underwater city of Atlantis, home to the mermaids. He sees that a surveillance submarine has crashed into the city, destroying a large part of it with civilians trapped in the rubble. Clark uses his strength to help them rebuild for a few hours. He's strongly attracted to Laurie, who tells him to stay back with her and make her his queen. He tells her he has to go back above to his job, but promises to return. Back at the base, his training continues, and Clark finds himself getting uncomfortable at being taught how to kill. Even as he's thinking about this, his unit's called in for combat on an oil tanker that's been taken over by pirates. As the team engages the pirates, Clark finds himself unable to pull the trigger to kill a man despite direct orders to do so. While the op goes off without a glitch, his unwillingness to follow orders is reported and a court-martial follows. Given due consideration to his record, the Navy gives him an honorable discharge and the CO tells him to go on home. Clark packs his bags and runs into the ocean, having made up his mind to go back to Laurie as he promised. After a passionate meeting with Laurie, she tells him to wear his best suit because it's time to meet her father. And for the first time, we see Clark walking on the seabed in the classic Superman costume and cape that Martha had stuffed into his bag when he left home. Laurie's father is Poseidon, the Lord of the Seven Seas, and Clark knows that he'll be tested. As Clark walks into Atlantis, he's first attacked by a giant metal sentry which he defeats to get admittance into Poseidon's court. Unimpressed, Poseidon orders that he be tested properly, and Clark's led outside where they first drop a mountain on him, then follow it up with monster porcupines with poisoned quills, energy blasts from their spears, and finally a kraken, the giant sea monster. Superman survives them all, but Poseidon doesn't relent. Things take a dark turn with Poseidon declaring that Laurie will never leave his side because she's not just a princess, but will also become his bride. Laurie and Superman realize that he's gone mad, fearing the loss of his throne. He calls the Kraken once more to crush his daughter's suitor into the seabed, but Superman emerges unscathed. The chapter ends with Poseidon finally relenting and leaving Atlantis to plot his revenge, while Superman is crowned the new king, with Laurie as his queen. Book 3. The story opens on Lois Lane being rescued from a damaged submarine by Superman, who then discovers she's a reporter for the Daily Planet. A year later, we see Clark Kent getting off a train at Metropolis. He's now majored in journalism at Kansas State University and managed to get a job at the Daily Planet. Having grown up in a small town, he finds Metropolis fascinating. A whole new world with a whole new cast of characters, he thinks to himself. A million disguises to be had. Why shouldn't Clark Kent be the Mask? As he walks into the office for the first time, he sees Lois and realizes that she'll recognize him as Superman. He ducks out and quickly gets himself a hat and a set of glasses, completing the Clark Kent reporter persona. By night, he patrols the city looking for crimes he can stop, from bank robberies to drug dealers to abusive husbands. The police start finding criminals bound and gagged, waiting for them. His legend grows. The sightings increase and he's celebrated by the media, the police, and the common man. Fighting crime has allowed Superman to test his powers, and he finds himself getting stronger every day and gaining more control over it. This allows him to perform feats he never would have been able to earlier. like bending a steel roof into a barrier between terrorists and their hostages. Soon he meets Lex Luthor, a tycoon with illegitimate business interests in both Gotham and Metropolis. Lex wants to take down Batman because of his continued interference in Lex's interests, with the latest being the destruction of an arms shipment. Luthor realizes that while both Batman and Superman are vigilantes, their definitions of justice are at odds. He uses this to pit Superman against Batman by pointing out that Gotham's vigilantes' rough methods make him a terrorist. Despite the evidence, Superman doesn't trust Luthor, but finds himself strategically engaged for the job at a press event and is unable to directly refuse. Superman goes to Gotham, and as the two meet, Superman thinks to himself, "I am Superman, and he isn't one bit afraid of me. Not one bit." Batman goes on the offensive immediately, trying his best to hurt Superman with everything from bullets to electricity to punches from his charged gauntlets. Superman remains unmoved and is about to punch him when Wonder Woman grabs his wrist, telling them both that they're making fools of themselves and that from that they should join forces to serve one cause: justice. The three of them then go to LexCorp headquarters in Metropolis to confront Luthor. Using her lasso of truth, Diana gets Luthor to confess, and he gives them a complete list of his involvement in everything from drugs to weapons. He also tells them that his sources tell him the last lost tribe of Krypton are now living shrunken prisoners in the bottle city of Kandor, slaves to the android demon Brainiac. As Superman is about to rush off to rescue his people, Diana asks him to give her a day to prepare so she can go with him and help. He refuses, saying he can't risk her. He kisses her on the forehead and leaves. The story ends with Superman flying into space, a red streak, leaving Earth behind. The third part in the Earth 31 series is All-Star Batman and Robin, the Boy Wonder. All-Star Batman and Robin, The Boy Wonder. Episode 1. The story opens on a thrilling note with 12-year-old Dick Grayson performing daredevil aerial acrobats at the circus with his parents. Bruce Wayne is there on a date with reporter Vicky Vale, who's impressed with the young boy's performance. Bruce tells her that he's had his eye on the boy for a while, but doesn't tell her why. As the trio finish their act and take in the applause, his parents are shot and killed, falling to the ground in a pool of blood in front of their child, who's in deep shock, trying to process what just happened. Bruce immediately disappears, changing into his Batman costume and apprehends the shooter, identifying him as Jocko Boy Vanzetti, a gun for hire. Knowing it'll take time to find the man who gave the order to shoot, Batman decides to first go after the boy, who he knows is still in danger. Meanwhile, the cops get to the circus and take the surviving child. Knowing the cops are crooked, Vale tries to intervene and in the ensuing altercation is struck by one of the policemen. She knows that not one person in the crowd will report the altercation because they know the report will go missing, and so will they. Alfred comes with the car for her, and she insists on driving, chasing after the patrol car that took Dick Grayson away. She rightly suspects they're going to try to intimidate the boy into not becoming a witness, and tells Alfred to get his camera out so she can take pictures of the felony and send it to Washington. In the patrol car, Dick Grayson tells the cops he can identify the shooter even when they insist that he's remembering things wrong. Knowing it'll take more than just words to convince the boy, the cops take Dick to Galt's Gulch, a remote spot in the woods, unaware that they're being followed by Vale and Alfred. Batman's already there, waiting for the cops, and before they can begin beating the child, he uses his sonic transmitter to call a large number of bats who scratch and bite at the cops as they fly in. Terrified, the cops leave young Grayson on the ground and rush into the car, eager to get away. The episode closes with Batman lifting the child, saying, "You've just been drafted into a war." Episode 2. Picking up moments after the first episode, we see Batman has young Grayson in his car and they're driving away from the city to the Batcave. Batman's aware that he's just kidnapped a traumatized youngster, but also notes that the boy is very strong for his age. The boy is confused and struggles, and Batman tries to knock him out with some gas from his glove. Back at the Gulch, Alfred is bandaging an injured Vicky Vale. In their rush to leave, the policeman crashed into the Wayne's Rolls Royce, and both cars lie banged up nearby. Vale recalls the events of the evening to the point of witnessing Batman kidnapping the child before passing out again. Despite the gassing, Grayson hasn't passed out, shocking even Batman. It's merely calmed him down. Batman tells him to sleep, saying, "The world I'm gonna wake you up to will be no better than the world you already know, but it'll make a whole lot more sense than the one that did once I put you through holy hell," and refers to him as his ward. Unfazed, Grayson starts to analyze Batman, silently noting that he doesn't use his real voice and tries to sound like Clint Eastwood. Batman takes a harsh tone with the boy, trying to scare him into silence, but Grayson starts asking questions, impressing Batman with his bravery. But Batman needs the boy to be scared for what he has in mind. As they drive, they're chased by cops on motorcycles who try to shoot at them, prompting Batman to turn the car around and swerve into the motorcycles, knocking them off the road. This finally scares Grayson, who exclaims that Batman must be insane. Having got the reaction he wanted, Batman escalates his actions to jump the Batmobile on a row of patrol cars blocking the road ahead, laughing as he does it. And to take things further, he transforms the Batmobile into a fighter plane and flies above the clouds. Grayson finally breaks down crying about his parents' death, saying he doesn't understand what's happening, and Batman slaps him to shut him up. He feels guilty and questions his actions with the boy, but tells himself it's the only way to keep the boy from grieving because grief is the enemy. Grief turns acceptance into forgiveness. Grief forgives what can never be forgiven. Instead of apologizing to the boy, he tells him that he's got a lot to learn about fighting crime, and Grayson retorts saying, "But isn't that what cops do? And didn't you just waste a whole pile of cops, big guy?" Batman stops short of slapping him again, and after a bout of silence tells the boy that his lessons start here and now. And lesson number 1 is, never talk to cops. Not in Gotham. Never let a cop get near you. And then, taking a softer tone for the first time, he tells the boy to be brave. Grayson realizes that Batman is asking him to join his crusade against crime and reasons that fighting crime is dangerous. His thoughts turn to his parents. "Mom, Dad, what do I do? Why did you die? Who killed you?" He looks up at Batman and says, "Yes, sir, I'll be brave." Episode 3. The next episode starts with a story set 6 months earlier in a rundown bar called the Black Canary, where a sultry costumed bartender in fishnets and a mask is serving drinks to a rough crowd of drunks, most of whom are leering and trying to flirt. It's a night like any other, but tonight she's been getting angrier by the moment and she can't understand why. She finally snaps when one of the men touches her, spurring her into fighting all the customers. As she finishes the fight, she realizes that what set her off was a single solitary man who's got her thinking all different. A man she's never met. A man who stood up and said enough to all the foul world. He quits her job and rides away on a motorcycle as dawn approaches. The story swings back to the present, where Batman is bringing Dick Grayson to the Batcave via the underwater entrance, having now transformed the Batmobile from an airplane to a submarine. Batman is aware that he's kidnapped and drafted a traumatized youngster into his war, and while he's aware of Dick's intelligence and capabilities, he does have a bit of a doubt about whether he's done the right thing. The chapter ends with Superman reading the headlines about Batman kidnapping Dick Grayson as his eyes glow red with anger. Episode 4. The episode opens with a brief glimpse of Vicky Vale fighting for her life in a hospital, and she goes into cardiac arrest even as doctors scramble to save her. Meanwhile, Batman continues to ponder his decision to take responsibility for the child. He knows there'll be hell to pay for this. Ideally, he'd have liked to have waited a few years before recruiting him, but the shooter changed all that. As they finally surface inside the Batcave, Dick Grayson is stunned by its scale, technology, and weaponry. But once, he's speechless. We see the beginnings of a brotherly relationship when Batman, clearly proud of his cave, says, "Is this cool or what?" And despite being impressed, Grayson replies with an unenthusiastic, "Yeah, I guess it's okay. I mean, I've seen better, but I guess this is okay." Infuriating Batman. Batman gets a call from Alfred, who tells him that Vicky Vale is in critical condition. Batman tells him to get a particular doctor from Paris, adding, "Get that clown in Metropolis to fetch him. Call Kent at the Daily Planet. Tell him Batman considers this a personal favor." Reveling in the thought that he knows the true identity of Superman, while Superman still has no idea of Batman's identity. Batman goes out again, leaving the boy in the cave with only bats and rats for company, without food or a bed. Finally alone, Dick Grayson cries himself to sleep on the floor, cursing Batman. However, when he wakes up, he finds he's been changed into silk pajamas, given a blanket and a tray of food lies nearby. The episode closes with Batman storming off in anger after an argument with Alfred on how the child is being treated, which isn't in line with his plans for training the boy. Episode 5. Back in Metropolis, a visibly incensed Wonder Woman walks down the street in a dilapidated part of town and breaks into an abandoned factory. She's there for a meeting of the Justice League, with Superman, Green Lantern, and Plastic Man to discuss the kidnapping of Dick Grayson by Batman. Superman wants to turn Batman over to the authorities, while Green Lantern wants to try to talk some sense into him, and Plastic Man wants to invite him to join the gang. Wonder Woman is infuriated by their solutions, finding them too soft. "We hunt down this Batman like a rabid dog," she says. "We kill him. We chop off his head and plant it on a stake and present it to your authorities. And if none of you are men enough, I'll dispatch the psychopath myself." Things heat up between her and Superman, and the two almost come to blows, but end up in a passionate kiss that surprises them both. As she walks out, she tells them to give it the best shot, or else she'll take care of it regardless of their rules. Meanwhile, in Gotham, we see a darker and edgier Batman patrolling the night. He's brutal in his tactics to stop an assault on a woman and tells her not to bother calling the cops because they're worse than useless, and not to call an ambulance so that her assailants suffer. Back at Wayne Manor, Alfred thinks about Bruce Wayne and how even as a toddler there was something dark and wild behind the eyes. He thinks about how Bruce has become a demon. I pray the child will survive this. He thinks, I pray my master has not gone mad. The chapter closes with Dick Grayson exploring the cave and finding the armory. He's thrilled, as any boy his age would be, to wield a battle axe. Episode 6. Episode 6 continues the story of the same evening and follows Batman's patrol, showing a darker and more aggressive side. After saving the woman from the trio of rapists, he made a mugger eat his teeth and kicked a pimp off a fire escape 2 stories high. He's at the docks and hears the roar of Black Canary's bike nearby. He knows she's also trying to be a vigilante and thinks of her as an amateur wannabe. In another part of Gotham, we see a 15-year-old Barbara Gordon, daughter of James Gordon, rushing up the stairs to her apartment. She can hear her father on the phone with a woman named Sarah, telling her that he's missed her and talking about his kids. She knows he's talking to the woman of his dreams while his wife sits in the next room texting somebody. It doesn't faze her one bit. As she enters the apartment and goes to her room, we see a chain-smoking Gordon on the phone with Sarah. He doesn't acknowledge his disheveled wife as she comes to the kitchen and pours herself a drink. He talks about Batman and how he's become an urban legend, inspiring copycats, not knowing that his daughter has got herself a costume and is sneaking out to patrol the city like a vigilante. Meanwhile, Batman is waiting at the docks. He's heard that Jocko Boy Vanzetti, the man who shot Dick Grayson's parents, is walked free due to lack of evidence. Vanzetti is being dropped off at the docks by a crooked cop who helped hide the evidence. Batman jumps down and takes out the cop and Vanzetti. He wants information from Jocko Boy, but hears gunfire. Reasoning that Canary must be in trouble, he knocks out Vanzetti and rushes off to help her, arriving just in time to take on an armed gang she was fighting. Episode 7. Canary watches as Batman fights off the armed assailants, using bleach and thermite to set them on fire. As the fight ends, she finds herself attracted to him, and the two kiss and make out on the docks. As they kiss, Batman notes that she's a smoker and thinks to himself that he hasn't kissed a smoker in weeks, since Selina. This is perhaps the first time we're shown a philandering side of the Dark Knight, where he's possibly involved with 3 women: Vale, Selina, aka Catwoman, and now Black Canary. He gives Canary a ride home in the Batmobile, and she tells him it's a queer name for a car. A few moments later, after he mentions that sometimes he hates the sun, she tells him that he might benefit from having the occasional conversation with somebody you're not punching in the face. Grayson, meanwhile, has made his first kill. He used the battle axe to chop a rat in half because it wouldn't stop hissing at him. The action makes him throw up, and he wonders if he's gone as crazy as Batman. Batman gets back to his cave with Jocko Boy on his shoulder, bound and gagged, throwing him down in front of young Grayson. He tells the child that this is the man who has murdered his parents and that he alone will decide the man's fate. It's time for you to decide. Are you an avenger or a detective? He tells the boy it's a test to see if Grayson is worthy of becoming his partner. Grayson steps out, axe in hand, walking slowly toward Vanzetti. Batman tells him that Vanzetti is a paid killer with no family. As he brings the axe down on Vanzetti, Grayson makes his choice, slicing through the gag, but sparing the man. Batman watches as the boy beats up Vanzetti, noting the moves for the training that lies ahead. After a long beating, Grayson asks Vanzetti to name the person who hired him. We aren't told Vanzetti's reply, but the character ends on a Joker card. Episode 8. The issue begins on a grim note. Joker is looking out of a window at the rain, reminiscing that it's the only time he loves the city. Gotham is an ugly city full of shame, far beyond redemption, he thinks. She's a sad old whore, but she's beautiful when she cries. The woman in bed behind him is pulling on her clothes. She asks him his name and he tells her the truth. They call me the Joker, but I'm not very funny. She recalls the name and tells him there was somebody by that name who poisoned the water supply a year back, and he tells her it was him. He then tells her about her own accomplishments as an attorney who's brought down child molesters and how he admires her. Without warning, he punches her and methodically strangles her with a tie as he explains that once the larynx is good and crushed, the object can't make very much noise. No reason to disturb the neighbors. There's none of the maniacal laughter that we associate with the Joker, and that makes him come across as more dangerous than usual. As he walks out of the room, he tells his neo-Nazi assistant Bruno to get rid of the body. Meanwhile, back at the Batcave, Grayson asks Batman who the Joker is, and Batman tells him that the Joker is a serial killer, but he doesn't know what he's up to this time and why he would use Vanzetti to murder Dick's parents. Grayson wants to work with Batman on the case, and though he's initially hesitant, he agrees to let the boy come along once he gets a costume and a mask. Dick points out that he can't have a secret identity because too many people saw him being kidnapped by Batman and would therefore know who he was. Batman says he'll figure something out and tells him to start working on the costume. He also refers to Grayson as Boy Wonder, a name the boy immediately hates. Batman tells him to come up with something better and leaves the cave, dumping Vanzetti in his car's boot. As Batman gets to the river, he sees a Green Lantern signal in the skies above Gotham. "Not that moron," he thinks, referring to Green Lantern. He was expecting one of the Justice League to come and decides to get the meeting over with. He throws Vanzetti into the river and goes to Gotham. Back at the cave, we see young Grayson going through the armory. He selects a bow and pulls the string back, thinking of Robin Hood. He senses Alfred's presence in the cave, watching him. He thanks him for the food and tells him he needs some tights and a mask, as well as a cape with a hood. As Batman makes his way across Gotham to the source of the signal, we see that he thinks of Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, as a retarded demigod and a clown who makes oversized egg beaters and mousetraps and vacuum cleaners when he could set the whole world straight with the ring. He meets Jordan and gives him the address of a safe house, telling him to be there in 12 hours for a conversation. On the other side of town, Selina Kyle gets a visit from the Joker, asking her to join him in some mischief, to which she agrees. The episode closes with Batman returning to the Batcave to find a costumed Grayson, who's chosen the name Hood, because his dad always made him watch an old movie about Robin Hood. Batman points out the tactical disadvantage of wearing a hood in a fight, saying, "Lose the hood, you're Robin." Episode 9. Batman meets with the Green Lantern at the safe house. He knows Hal's ring is powerless against the color yellow and had Robin paint every inch of the room a bright yellow, coloring even himself in yellow. Despite Batman's outright hostility, Hal explains that he's been given one chance to talk some sense into him to amend his methods because what one does affects them all. "They'll bring us all down because of you," Jordan tells him. "They'll think we're all as crazy as you are. You've already got half of them calling us criminals." Batman replies, telling him they've always been criminals because they have to be. This provokes him into punching Batman, who doesn't retaliate. Jordan notices that Robin's come in and tells Batman that he's out of his mind to have kidnapped a boy and dressed him up as a sidekick. Batman tells him he rescued Dick Grayson from a pack of corrupt cops and admitted him to a trauma clinic where his identity was kept a secret to avoid undue attention. He goes on to show that a public statement's already been made. Jordan doesn't buy the story, but he can't prove otherwise. Batman tells him Robin is a whirling dervish in a fight. Jordan tells him to go to hell, as he's ready to walk out when Robin asks him where his ring is, holding it up. Jordan's ready to fight Robin for the ring, and Batman warns him not to, but lets him go fight anyway. Robin throws Batman the ring and proceeds to fight Hal, who's not a trained fighter and finds himself defenseless without his ring. Robin shows no restraint and lands a lethal strike to the trachea. Seeing things have gone too far, a livid Batman steps in to pull Robin off and knocks him down with a punch. He then saves Hal's life and calls an ambulance. As the two of them walk back to the car, each is lost in his own thoughts. Robin is crying. He realizes that he almost killed a man who'd never done him any harm and that he'd enjoyed every second of it, that he wanted to kill him. Batman acknowledges to himself that he's made a mistake, that he's taken in an adept and taught him how to fight and how to kill. He realizes he rushed things and that he was reckless. He thinks of the years he spent learning from wise gurus and Alfred. All he's had is weeks in the hands of a joyriding, cackling lunatic, he thinks. He remembers that he had years to grieve, and grieving is where it all started. He'd thought grief was the enemy, but he was wrong. He tells Robin to get in the car, and the two drive to the cemetery where the Graysons are buried. Find them, say goodbye, he tells Robin. The issue ends with Robin finally breaking down and crying over his parents' death as Batman holds him close like a father. Episode 10. The final issue takes place a week later. Captain James Gordon stands at the edge of a pier and talks, seemingly to himself, about a young night-beat cop called Stavros, who brought him a piece of cardboard. Stavros had followed a trail of blood to a woman dressed up like a cat. She was badly injured but refused the officer's help. She gave him a crumpled piece of cardboard, telling him he needed to get it to Batman, and then slipped into the shadows. Gordon says he saw the piece of cardboard was a note written in blood and that it didn't make any sense. He drops it into the water. Below the pier, we see Batman and Robin standing in the water, having intercepted the note. Batman reads the note, which simply reads, "The first time." It means something to him, and the duo rush away. As Gordon goes back to his car, Officer Merkel informs him his wife called his phone because she was unable to get through to Gordon. Gordon calls back. He can't understand what she's saying because of the music in the background. He asks if she's been drinking, and she hangs up the phone. He tries to call again, but she doesn't pick up. Nothing's been the same since Sarah, he thinks with sadness. Meanwhile, Batman and Robin go to Batman's first Batcave. He'd understood exactly what the note meant. referring to the place where they made love for the first time. The duo finds Selina bruised and bleeding, and Batman tenderly holds her as Robin calls Alfred, telling him to scramble the chopper. In another part of town, Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, takes down a gang of drug dealers in an arcade. She beats up a couple of them and the crowd joins in, beating them down. Barbara is thrilled with the result. She soon realizes that the crowd has gone out of control and might end up killing the dealers, which is not what she wanted. The cops come to break up the fight and she finds herself placed under arrest with the rest of them. At the same time, the Black Canary has taken down a prostitution and loan sharking operation. She takes some of the money with her before leaving the rest to burn down with the building. As she walks out, she's thinking of women whom she might ask to join her as partners. As Captain Gordon heads home, he's informed that his wife has met with an accident. It turns out that she was driving while intoxicated, and he's told that an ambulance is already taking her to a hospital. He goes to the hospital and is told by the doctor that while his wife is out of immediate danger, she needs to go through detox and could very well die if she doesn't stop drinking. At the same time, Merkel steps into the room to tell Gordon that his daughter's called and that she's only allowed one call. He goes to the station and meets his costumed daughter. She's been charged with assault, battery, destruction of public property, and incitement to riot. She tells him not to use his influence for her sake in any way. She asks if her mum knows yet, and James is forced to tell her about the accident. Noting the sadness in him, she tells him to call Sarah because that'll help. Gordon walks back to the hospital, waiting for his wife to regain consciousness. He doesn't know how his daughter knows about Sarah, but he takes her advice and makes the call. The story ends with Gordon on the phone with Sarah, thinking that there's only one person he would love to tell all his problems to. One man. But he's miles from there, and Gordon isn't even supposed to know his real name. But he tells himself everything's going to be alright. The fourth installment of the saga continues in the single issue Spawn Batman. Spawn Batman. The story begins on a cold night in Gotham's waterfront. Batman's just beaten up a gang of thugs in a warehouse full of Soviet-era weapons. He notes a few strange high-tech devices, including a pair of electric battle gloves. As he tries them on, a giant spider-like robot leaps up and lunges at him. In the ensuing fight, he uses the power gloves to punch the robot, shattering a visor that reveals a human head staring back at him. Taken aback, he notes that at least part of it is human and talks to him, asking, "Where am I?" As the robot continues to fight him, Batman realizes the man inside the robot has no free will and speaks English in a Brooklyn accent. He manages to disable the robot, trying to get the man out. He sees that it's only the head of a human inside, without the body. As the robot starts a self-destruct sequence, Batman tries to save what remains of the man, pulling the head free, but after the ensuing explosion is left with a lifeless head that's now just a piece of evidence. Back at the Batcave, Batman tries to analyze the head and, using dental records, identifies the person as a 42-year-old vagrant who was last seen in Manhattan and presumed dead. He tells Alfred to put the head and the battle gloves in the vault and leaves for New York City to continue his investigation. In the course of his investigation, Batman also ends up stopping muggings and assaults in New York, and sightings of Gotham's Caped Crusader make the news. As he eavesdrops on New York's homeless, listening for any clue that might help his investigation, he frequently hears stories of a man called Al, a bum who's possessed with seemingly magical powers, and dismisses it. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Spawn is carrying out his investigation of some missing friends. As he stops a pair of would-be murderers by burning them, Batman comes upon him and, mistaking Spawn for a criminal, attacks him. In the ensuing fight, Spawn recognizes Batman and holds back, trying to explain to him that they shouldn't be fighting. Batman, however, is in no mood to listen and continues to fight even as he realizes that Spawn is immune to his attacks. He finally doses Spawn with nerve gas, and Spawn is forced to use his magic to overpower him, and Batman retreats to recover from the beating. Spawn continues the investigation, and a tip from a junkie leads him to a building owned by Heal the World, a philanthropic foundation. Its founder, Dr. Margaret Love, has recently been in the news for the foundation's work with New York City's homeless. Spawn breaks into the shelter and finds equipment that suggests the shelter is built for more than just feeding people. His presence is detected, and he's attacked by a robot similar to the one that attacked Batman in the warehouse. He uses his magic and defeats it, pulling out the living head inside. He recognizes the head as that of his friend Chuck, who's confused and doesn't know what happened to him. A part of the robot he's just defeated crashes into the wall, causing a recorded message from the founder to start playing on a screen. It's a hypnotic voice that speaks of letting go of mortal bodies. Spawn recognizes Dr. Margaret Love from his battlefield memories, a soldier, Al Simmons. He remembers her as an evil scientist whose experiments caused men to scream and die while she stood by, smiling. As his anger rises, he uses his hell power to destroy the building and equipment within. Batman patches himself up, getting ready to fight Spawn again. As he steps out into the night, he sees a bat signal over the Manhattan skyline. Responding, he goes to the source of of the signal and meets Dr. Margaret Love, who he thinks is an angel of mercy. Margaret tells him that Spawn has destroyed the mission and she fears more of the same at a fundraiser she's hosting on a ship, which will be attended by several influential men, including the President. An enraged Batman assures her that Spawn will be stopped and prepares to fight him again. To even the odds, he has Alfred send the battle gloves he found earlier in the warehouse. Batman tracks Spawn down in an alley, and the two fight. They're now more evenly matched, and just as the two of them have beaten each other senseless, they're attacked by a trio of cyborg robots sent by Margaret Love to ensure they both die. Batman is mortally wounded, and Spawn uses magic to destroy the robots and save Batman's life. In the process, Spawn gets into Batman's head, showing him the truth about Dr. Love. Batman finally understands, and the two decide to team up. Meanwhile, out on the waters, the fundraiser has started. Unknown to the guests, the punch has been spiked with a drug that makes the mind open to suggestion. Margaret uses her hypnotic voice to tell her guests, including the President, that people are the problem in the world and that they need to start afresh. All it will take is a war that will grow and grow until the fire is everywhere, she says. Then, when the fires have died out, historic work will truly begin. Under her spell, the influential guests on board agree with her point of view, and she shows them the arsenal of weapons in the ship's hold. Spawn and Batman arrive and start fighting Margaret's guards and cyborgs. As the two fight, the explosives on the ship start to go off, and Dr. Love is speared through the chest with shrapnel. As she lies dying, she pushes a button on a locket of her necklace and releases a nuke that targets New York City. Spawn grabs Batman, and using his hell power, teleports the two of them onto the side of the rocket, where Batman then proceeds to disable the nuke, causing it to fall harmlessly into the river. The story concludes with Spawn suggesting to Batman that they bury the hatchet, to which Batman responds by throwing a batarang into his face, suggesting that the fight continues. The saga then moves forward a few decades to the Dark Knight Returns era. The Dark Knight Returns. Issue 1, The Dark Knight Returns. The story begins in a dystopian Gotham City of the future, amid a heatwave. The city is plagued by a criminal gang known as the Mutants. Police Commissioner James Gordon is about to retire in a month on his 70th birthday. It's been 10 years since the last recorded sighting of the Batman. In his 50s now, Bruce Wayne has retired. He and Gordon are friends, and Bruce even drinks now, no longer substituting ginger ale for champagne. He lives alone in the large manor with Alfred. Batman's enemies also seem to have retired Joker and Two-Face, aka Harvey Dent, secure in Arkham. Dent, having spent 12 years in Arkham, is about to be released. The burnt side of his face has been reconstructed by plastic surgeons, and his doctors are confident he's ready to get back to society. James Gordon, however, remains unconvinced. Dent is released, and after a brief statement to the media about getting on the route to absolution, immediately disappears and finds his old gang. Unlike what the doctors thought, his Two-Face persona has now taken him over completely. Back at Wayne Manor, we find a Bruce Wayne who still suffers from nightmares of his childhood tragedy. He stays up at night fighting his inner demons, which keep telling him to go out once more as Batman. His nightmares, coupled with the rising crime in the city, finally make him relent to his Batman persona as he takes up the cowl once more and goes out into the night. Sightings of the Batman surface across the city once more, and a media frenzy follows as his exploits against Gotham's underworld continue. One evening, Batman chases a gang of payroll robbers into a building, and after disarming them, finds Harvey's old coin on one of them, confirming Dent's involvement. As the cops arrive on the scene, he tells them to tell Gordon that they need to talk about disappearing. Batman's reappearance sparks a media debate on whether or not Batman is a criminal, with some viewers calling him a fascist, while others approve of his actions. Watching the debate in Arkham is an aging and almost catatonic Joker. The name Batman sparks something in him, and we see a glimpse of the old psychopath criminal rekindling. Meanwhile, the leader of the mutants puts out a statement saying he'll kill Commissioner Gordon and Batman himself. Batman continues his investigation of Dent and follows one of Dent's men, beating more information out of him. He then meets Gordon and tells him that he suspects the payroll robbery was committed by Two-Face to pay for something twice as big, happening the following day. Gordon tells Batman that it could have been to pay for 2 helicopters that were stolen recently, and they reason that the crime would be perpetrated by air. Back at Arkham, Joker gets a visit from Abner, one of his old associates, who tells him that Harvey Dent is paying him to make some bombs, and he wants the Joker's permission to work with him. Joker asks him, "What kind of bombs?" Batman figures out that Dent is going to attack Gotham's Twin Towers and lies in wait for him as the 2 helicopters approach the buildings. One of the choppers lands on the roof near him, and he manages to take down Harvey's crew and finds out that it's carrying a large bomb. He notes that the design of the bomb would be worthy of the Joker, and that a disguised timer mechanism is already counting down and ready to go off at any moment. Batman disables the timer, rendering the bomb useless. Meanwhile, Harvey, still oblivious to Batman's presence, is in the other chopper. He hacks the television signal and holds the city ransom, demanding a sum of $5 million in exchange for not blowing up both buildings. Batman deduces that Harvey doesn't know about the timer and goes after him. In the ensuing fight, Harvey falls out of the chopper, but is saved by Batman, who finally understands that while the world sees Harvey as normal, he sees himself as scarred. Issue 2, Dark Knight, Triumphant. Picking up a few weeks after the events of the previous issue, we see Gordon in the final week before his imminent retirement. The mayor hasn't decided yet on who will replace him. He's still marked for death by the mutant gang leader, and the story begins with him foiling an assassination attempt on his life by shooting a 17-year-old mutant. His offer to stay on as commissioner till the mutant crisis is solved is rejected by the mayor, with the police public relations director saying that things might even cool down with the mutants once he steps down, since they seem to have a thing for him. In another part of the city, we see teenager Carrie Kelly, whom Batman had previously saved from mutant muggers, buy herself a Robin costume. She's a scout and a gymnast who wants to become Batman's partner. She steps out into the city, trying to train herself to fight crime. Meanwhile, Batman rescues a kidnapped baby from some mutants. He notes that the weaponry is distinctly military and interrogates one of them about its source. His investigation leads him to a general who commits suicide. He'd sold the weapons to pay for his wife's medical treatment when the insurance company refused to pay for it. As Carrie patrols the streets, she overhears some mutants talking about a big meeting taking place at the dump. She reasons that Batman might be there and decides to go herself. Carrie's instincts are right, and Batman gets to the meeting in the Batmobile, which resembles a giant armored tank more than a car. At the meeting, the mutant leader tells his men to take the weapons, storm police headquarters, and bring him the head of Old Man Gordon. Batman, who's been hearing the speech, drives the Batmobile into their midst and starts a fight. The retaliating mutants mostly hurt themselves in the crossfire. The dust settles and the mutants' leader is still standing, unscathed. He calls on Batman to come out and fight him. Against Alfred's advice, Batman steps out of the tank and the two start fighting, to the delight of Carrie, who's been watching the whole thing from afar. The fight takes an unexpected turn as Batman realizes the mutant leader is too strong for him to defeat in hand-to-hand combat. But he realizes this too late, and as the mutant leader comes close to delivering the lethal blow, Carrie comes out of hiding and jumps on the leader's back and grabs his arm. Batman takes advantage of the confusion and gasses the leader just before passing out himself. Carrie then helps him get back inside the Batmobile and puts him on the stretcher inside. Alfred remotely controls the vehicle and helps stabilize Batman's condition. Batman regains consciousness and asks her who she is. Carrie Kelly, she says. Robin. The explosions at the dump attract the attention of the police, who get there in time to arrest the mutant gang, including the leader. On the other side of the country, in Washington, D.C., the president has a meeting with Superman and tells him to get Batman under control. With a large number of their gang in jail, the remaining members put out a statement promising carnage in Gotham if their leader isn't freed. The mayor, intimidated by the threat, offers to meet with the mutant leader to negotiate peace. The mutant leader agrees to the meeting on the condition that they meet alone, and at the meeting he rips the mayor's throat out with his teeth, killing him. Batman recovers and takes on young Carrie as his protege, making her the new Robin, and starts training her. He realizes that arresting the mutants won't solve the problem because there are too many of them. They have to be defeated. Humiliated, he tells Gordon and asks him for one last favor. Batman sends Carrie out in disguise as a mutant to spread the word about a meeting at the pipe, and Gordon secretly lets the mutant leader out of prison. Batman guides the mutant leader to the pipe and they fight one-on-one in the mud, surrounded by all the mutants. Batman defeats the leader, and the mutant army starts to refer to themselves as Sons of Batman, proclaiming that Gotham City belongs to the Batman, and they'll henceforth turn on criminals instead of innocents. The issue ends with Ellen Yindel taking over as the new police commissioner, and Gordon turning in his badge and gun. Issue 3, Hunt the Dark Knight. As Ellen Yindel takes office, her first action as commissioner is to put out an arrest order for the arrest of Batman. Batman and Robin pursue Bruno, a known associate of the Joker. Batman suspects that he has something bad planned for his upcoming television interview. Their attempt to get information from Bruno comes to a stop when Superman suddenly comes into town and, thinking he's helping, knocks her out. Batman then goes after another known associate, Abner, but Robin sets off an exploding doll in his apartment, causing an explosion that levels the whole building. Superman warns Batman to go back into retirement, hinting that the president might order him to arrest Batman. Batman refuses, and Superman leaves as war breaks out between American and Soviet forces on the island nation of Corto Maltese. Knowing that Batman will try to interfere with the Joker's television interview, Yindel has units waiting above and inside the building. Batman and Robin arrive by helicopter, and Batman tells Robin to stay in the chopper while he deals with the cops. He's almost overwhelmed, and Robin disobeys his orders, flying in to save him from capture. At the same time, the Joker, with Abner's help, gasses everyone in the audience and escapes, killing 206 people. He goes to meet Selina Kyle, who's now running a high-profile escort service. Using mind-control lipstick, he gets one of the girls to convince a congressman to commit suicide. Batman and Robin reach Selina's apartment and find her beaten and tied up. As they free her, she tells them one of the other girls has gone to meet the governor. Robin finds cotton candy on the floor of the apartment, and Batman deduces the county fair will be the Joker's next target. As Batman and Robin rush out, they run into Yindel and the police but manage to escape. Batman then reaches Yindel on her radio and tells her the governor's life is in danger and that he doesn't have the time to save him. Meanwhile, Superman fights the Soviet forces in Corto Maltese at the president's orders, taking apart missiles, aircraft, and ships. As he fights, he thinks of why and how the Justice League disbanded, with just himself remaining as the last superhero. He blames Batman for it, thinking, "You were the one they used against us, Bruce. The one who played it rough. Nothing matters to you except your holy war. They'll hunt us down again because of you." Batman and Robin reach the county fair and see bodies of dead children around a cotton candy kiosk. They spot the Joker and Abner at the roller coaster. Batman goes after Joker, leaving Robin to deal with Abner. Batman chases Joker through the House of Mirrors and then into the Tunnel of Love ride. As they tangle, the Joker manages to stab Batman several times, and while Batman intends to kill him, he can't bring himself to do it, choosing instead to break Joker's neck just enough to cause paralysis. The Joker tells him the moment was perfect, but that Batman just didn't have the nerve to apply a bit more pressure and kill him. There are sirens in the distance, and Joker tells Batman that since there are no witnesses, the cops will finally make him out to be a murderer, and snaps what's left of his own spine and dies. The issue ends with Batman sitting next to a dead Joker as he slowly passes out. Issue 4, The Dark Knight Falls. As the cops go into the tunnel, Batman prepares his escape. Setting off explosions while doing as little damage as possible to the policeman, Batman escapes with Robin's help. The police find Joker's body, mutilated and burned, leading to Batman being finally charged with murder. Meanwhile, reacting to their loss at Corto Maltese, the Soviets launched an unconventional nuclear warhead called the Coldbringer at the nation. Superman races to stop it and manages to change its trajectory, causing it to explode over the desert. While it doesn't kill anyone, the magnetic pulse it generates shuts down all electrical equipment across the United States. The ensuing panic causes pandemonium across the country, with planes falling out of the sky and people rioting in the streets. Back at the manor, Bruce Wayne is recovering from his recent fight with the Joker. He gets out of bed when he realizes the entire city is in a blackout. He knows the streets of Gotham will be filled with looters. He and Robin get on horseback and ride to the dump and recruit members of the mutant gang, who now call themselves the Sons of Batman, to police the city under his watch. As they get to the city, they see that the mutant gang members who were jailed have broken out of police headquarters. As Commissioner Yindel watches from her office window, Batman takes control of them and puts them to work alongside the Sons of Batman. Yindel keeps her men from firing at Batman, saying he's too big. A week later, power is restored, but the weather has changed, a side effect of the Coldbringer missile that created a black cloud over the Americas, causing the skies to remain dark and the weather to grow cold. The president imposes limited martial law, deploying military aid to law enforcement agencies against outbreaks of violence and looting in every major city in America except Gotham, where the streets remain safe thanks to Batman and his vigilante gang. Bruce gets a visit from Oliver Queen, who's now a fugitive from law and has lost an arm. He tells Bruce that the government has no choice but to kill Batman, going on to say, "I always knew it'd get down to you and Big Blue Schoolboy. When it comes all down, I want a piece of him." Batman tells Superman to meet him at Crime Alley for the showdown, and prepares himself. Army troops evacuate the area, and the media is kept away from it. Batman arrives in his tank and waits for Superman, who turns up shortly before midnight. As the fight begins, Alfred activates the self-destruct sequence in Wayne Manor. Batman is specially armored for the fight and has brought special weaponry. He uses the sonic blast to give Superman a nosebleed, and then electrocutes him with the entire city's power supply, causing a blackout. Batman feels his heart giving out but keeps fighting. As Superman crushes his wrist and breaks his ribs, Oliver Queen comes out of hiding and shoots him with a special arrow that explodes and douses Superman in kryptonite, sapping his strength. Batman gets up and starts to fight a weakened Superman, knocking him down. Looking down at him, he says, "I want you to remember, Clark, in all the years to come, in your most private moments, I want you to remember my hand at your throat. I want you to remember the one man who beat you." Batman's heart finally stops, and he falls next to a bleeding Superman who holds his dead friend. As the clock strikes 12, Wayne Manor and the cave below are rocked with explosions as Alfred stands outside and looks on. He feels a stroke coming on and falls to the ground. 3 days later, the dark clouds finally clear. Batman's death has made the news. His identity as Bruce Wayne has been revealed, but the explosions at Wayne Manor have left no traces of his life. Even his money has gone missing. Clark attends Bruce's funeral. He's guilt-ridden, and as he walks away, he hears a faint beat. It grows louder. He turns and looks at the young girl who's purportedly Bruce's only living relative, a distant cousin. He realizes that it's Bruce's heartbeat that he can hear. He knows that Bruce fooled them all into thinking he was dead. He smiles and gives the girl a knowing wink as he leaves. The story closes in a cave. Bruce Wayne is directing his mutant army to set up their camp. With him are Robin and Oliver Queen. It begins here, he thinks. An army to bring sense to a world plagued by worse than thieves and murderers. This will be a good life. The next book in the series is the one-shot Last Crusade. It's a prequel to The Dark Knight Returns and delves into the incident that made Batman hang up the cowl, the death of the second Robin, Jason Todd. Dark Knight Returns, The Last Crusade. The story starts with the Joker being dragged into Arkham for the umpteenth time. Yet again, it was Batman and Robin who apprehended him. As the story is discussed in the media, Robin's age becomes a point of contention for some who feel that his involvement in crime fighting with Batman is tantamount to child endangerment, physically and psychologically. Moving forward, we see that Bruce Wayne is aging and his body is starting to feel the effects of his nightly adventures. He's finding it harder to get out of bed, his muscles hurt more and he's getting a bit slower. He notes that Robin has been getting better and can even match him in a fight. Alfred informs him that one of his friends, philanthropist Winston Edgewater, committed suicide. When Bruce goes to see his wife, she informs him that she discovered Winston had a gambling problem and was in debt, leaving her penniless. He refuses to believe that Winston is a gambler but says nothing. Sometime later, he and Robin break up a drugstore robbery by Joker's gang, who continue to operate while he's in Arkham. After a brief shootout, the gang tries to escape and the duo chase them on motorcycles. The chase ends when Batman incapacitates the van, and in the ensuing fight, Batman takes note of Robin's cold ferocity as he brutally takes down one of the robbers and even smiles at the result. Batman goes to see Selina Kyle, who's given up her life of crime and her catsuit. He confesses to her that he's feeling old and slowing down, but that he's not ready to retire yet because Robin isn't ready to take his place and he isn't ready for civilian life yet. Soon, Tavis Farley, another of Gotham's wealthiest, goes unhinged, holding a gun to his wife, saying he needs to kill his wife to prove he loves her. Robin disarms the man by throwing a batarang that almost slices through the man's arm. Batman points out that Robin could have just knocked the gun out of his hand and Robin just shrugs it off. These incidents prompt Batman to ask Alfred's opinion of Jason. Alfred tells him that Jason lacks empathy and can sometimes be cold. Batman investigates Tavis and suspects Poison Ivy's involvement, and notes that Tavis invested significantly in a company called Green Vein. He and Robin investigate Green Vein, and Batman tells Robin to stay in the car while he checks out the building. Inside, Batman finds Killer Croc asking for money from Langston Marks, a successful tech entrepreneur. The two get into a fight, and Croc almost kills him, but the cops come and Croc runs away. He realizes Jason called the cops. He's thankful, but tells Jason he was told to stay in the car, to which Jason responds, "I didn't listen." The following night, Batman and Robin continue to investigate Green Vein and manage to track down Ivy and confront her. As he watches Robin fight mercilessly, he realizes that the boy is exactly what he was trained to be. He and Killer Croc fight again, and Batman defeats him despite having broken ribs and a punctured lung. In the meantime, Joker escapes from Arkham again, and Jason wants to go after him immediately. But Batman, who's still recovering from his wounds, tells him to go to bed. As Jason leaves, he hears Batman tell Alfred that he's not ready and maybe he never will be. Jason disobeys him again and sneaks out, going after the Joker alone. Back at the mansion, Bruce and Alfred continue to discuss Jason. Bruce admits that Jason is better at combat than he was, but his deduction skills are a little rough. "I can show him how to be a better man." From the cave, a retired warrior philosopher. The story ends with Robin finding the Joker and getting discovered by Joker's men who beat him to death with sticks. The saga then reverts back to the Dark Knight Returns timeline and picks up the story 3 years after Bruce Wayne stages his death and goes away with Carrie Kelly as his new Robin. The Dark Knight Strikes Again, Issue 1. As the story opens, we're given a glimpse of a dystopic America where the president has repealed the Bill of Rights and turned the country into a police state. Congress passed the Freedom from Information Act, and almost everything is a national security secret. Carrie Kelly, the new Robin, rescues Ray Palmer, the Atom, from a secret government laboratory where he was imprisoned in a petri dish for 2 years. Carrie's given up the traditional Robin costume and is dressed in leopard print tights and goes by Catgirl. The two make a daring getaway and the story makes the news. While the president puts out a statement saying that certain biological materials were stolen by foreign agents, a rogue independent journalist shows footage hacked from the lab surveillance system showing Catgirl. An angry Superman, who's still the government's secret pawn, knows that it's Bruce Wayne's doing. He'd been trying to negotiate Palmer's release and had almost come to terms. "I tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen," he thinks to himself. "Your arrogance will bring calamity, atrocity, genocide. Meanwhile, at a press conference, as the president is putting out a statement in front of witnesses, his face pixelates for a moment and journalist James Olsen shouts out that it's a hologram and that the president doesn't exist other than as a computer-generated image. Soon after, Batman and his costumed gang of Bat Boys, formerly the Mutant Gang, launch an attack on a power complex that generates electricity for the entire eastern seaboard. Led by Atom and Catgirl, in full view of the media, they take on the guards, breaking their way in. No more pretending we don't exist, Batman thinks. Damn the consequences. The war begins. In the ensuing fight, Batman reveals his existence to the guards, ending the myth that he died. Catgirl and Atom get to the core of the complex where they see a large wheel spinning fast and endlessly. Atom sets off an explosion at its molecular levels, making the wheel explode, revealing Barry Allen, the Flash, who the government has had constantly running in circles to generate free electricity. Catgirl gives him his ring and the three of them exit the complex. The media captures the images of costumed men and proclaims that the boys are back in town. Superman calls for a secret meeting with Wonder Woman Diana and Billy Batson, aka Captain Marvel, at their old headquarters, the Satellite Watchtower. The meeting, however, is hijacked by Lex Luthor, who reveals himself and Brainiac to be the powers controlling the world. As punishment for attempting to meet in secret, Brainiac kills one family in the bottle city of Kandor, which he holds hostage and uses as leverage over Superman. Luthor then orders them to find out what happened to Ray Palmer and Barry Allen and who's behind the recent attacks and deliver those responsible to him. Superman, enraged at the death of his fellow Kryptonians, immediately goes to Gotham to Batman's cave. Batman and his allies are prepared for the fight with Barry, first placing a series of small bombs on him, followed by burying Superman under 90 tons of rock. All those high and mighty powers. They made you cocky, overconfident. Batman tells him, you never learn to think strategically. Oliver Queen, who now sports a prosthetic arm, then steps in to shoot an arrow that explodes with kryptonite napalm. Palmer then shrinks himself and runs into the weakened Superman's inner ear, messing with his sense of balance. Batman finishes the fight with punches from his armored glove. The episode ends with Batman standing over a battered Superman saying, I'm done talking. Get out of my cave. Issue 2. The events of Issue 1 put superheroes back into the public eye once more. Once thought dead or gone, the resurgence of costume vigilantes starts a fashion trend among the youth, and the government tries to ban a concert by the girl band called Super Chicks for the way they dress, mimicking vigilante superheroes. This spurs a public debate on whether the government has gone too far. Batman and Catgirl attack Lex Luthor and his government cronies, including the Secretary of State and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Batman tells Luthor that he's the database of information that allowed him to blackmail, bribe, or murder anyone who's opposed his hostile takeover of the planet. Before leaving, he marks Luthor's face with a Z. Meanwhile, Wonder Woman finds a battered Superman lying in his fortress of solitude. They talk about their daughter Lara, who's now 17. They've kept her existence hidden from the world, and even Superman has never met her, fearing that she too will become Luthor's slave like he has. Luthor informs Superman that he needs to stop an extraterrestrial monster heading for Metropolis that's destroyed everything in its path so far. Catgirl tells Batman about the monster, but he ignores it, saying it's just bait to lure them out of hiding. Instead, Batman, Catgirl, and Plastic Man break into Arkham Asylum and free Elongated Man from a secret chamber where he was being held captive. As Superman fights a losing battle with the monster, he's seen by the citizens of Metropolis, who are surprised that he isn't just a myth, as they believed. The monster turns out to be Brainiac, who tells Superman that defeating him in public will serve as a deterrent to the ongoing superhero fad, and if he resists, the people of Kandor will suffer dire consequences. Brainiac tells him to turn tail and run, but Superman refuses to run, replying, I won't flee, nor will I fight. Do your worst. As Superman lets Brainiac attack him, raining down fire on Metropolis. Captain Marvel steps in to rescue the civilians from the carnage, but falls in the attempt. Superman is almost killed by the monster, but his daughter Lara comes and saves him by burning down the monster with her heat vision. The defeat of the monster once again puts public opinion on the side of the heroes. Elsewhere, the vigilante Question tracks down John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, and tries to convince him to rise and fight against Superman and the government. Jones tells him that he's now useless because Luthor has put nanobots in his head that keep him constantly in pain, but that he does retain the ability to see a bit into the future, and he's going to die by fire that evening. Later that same evening, a man resembling the Joker attacks them, killing Jones. Green Arrow, who was following the duo, manages to save Question. Despite the ban, people turn up at the concert and protest the arrest of the Super Chicks, but Batman and his allies turn up, overpowering the armed guards before they can open fire on the crowd. The episode ends with Batman finally coming out into the open, pulling off his cowl to show himself to the crowd. He admits that it was Carrie's plan to grab hold of a fad and turn it into a revolution. Issue 3. The final issue of the story begins on a planet far away where Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, has lived since he left Earth decades ago. He receives a message from Batman that shows him the events of the past few days and the impact it's had on the common folk, from their despair to their rekindled hope. This is the world you turned your back on. These are the people you abandoned. Batman tells him, make your choice. Hal watches the message and leaves for Earth. He no longer needs a ring or a lantern. He's turned into pure will itself. In the aftermath of the carnage in Metropolis, Diana finds a fatally wounded Captain Marvel who tells her he can no longer recover, and with one last shout of Shazam, disappears into the ether. Superman too counts his losses as he realizes that Perry, Olsen and Lois are all dead, atomized in the explosion. Brainiac calls out to Lara, telling her to surrender to his bidding like her father, or else he'll destroy Kandor. Superman finally realizes that he has nothing left to lose and decides to stand up to his masters. The trio hatch a plan to steal Kandor from Brainiac. Meanwhile, Carrie Kelly, Catgirl, visits a young girl who calls herself Saturn Girl and can tell the future, asking her to join forces. The girl tells her that she'll be killed by the person who makes himself look like the Joker and hates her the most. Harry recalls that she already had a run-in with him in Gotham's catacombs and killed him using everything in her arsenal, including thermite, acid and C4, and then put an arrow between his eyes, just for good measure. The events at the concert lead to riots breaking out across Gotham City, and the government pushes back with a full-scale military response, with gunships heading toward the city. Superman takes them all down single-handedly. Lara pretends to surrender to Brainiac. Atom, who's hiding in Kara's eye, slips into Kandor while Brainiac pumps nanobots into Lara to ensure her obedience. At the same time, Batman lets himself be captured by Luthor and takes a beating while getting him to talk about his plans. Lex tells him the plan is to bomb the world from space and wreak enough destruction to leave just 1 billion people alive to make governing them more manageable. Hal arrives and uses his power to destroy Luthor's space arsenal within seconds. Luthor is then brutally killed by Hawkman's son. Lara heats her own body enough to destroy Brainiac's nanobots while, in Kandor, Atom grows himself to his full size, bursting the bottle and letting out the 10 million Kryptonians. The people of Kandor channel their heat to Lara, and she harnesses it and channels it with her heat vision to destroy Brainiac. As Batman leaves Luthor's building, he receives a distress call from Carrie back at the cave. She's under attack from the Joker-like villain and close to dying. Batman gets there and recognizes the imposter to be Dick Grayson, who he'd fired years ago for being incompetent. Lex and Brainiac had found him and genetically altered him to heal quickly from any wound. Batman engages the cave self-destruct sequence and drops Grayson toward the molten lava that flows miles below the cave. Carrie is pulled out of the cave by Elongated Man. Dick grabs onto a ledge below, and Batman goes down after him to ensure he doesn't survive. The two grapple and both go over, and Superman swoops in to save Batman at the last moment. The story ends as the cave explodes, swallowed by the lava, as Batman and Carrie fly away in the Batmobile. The saga then moves to Dark Knight 3, The Master Race. Master Race is a 9-issue miniseries that takes place 3 years after the death of Lex Luthor. Each issue is followed by a one-shot tie-in story that details events around the main story. Dark Knight 3, The Master Race, Book 1. The story opens in a cave where a display case is broken and the Batsuit is stolen. In Gotham, a young boy is being chased by the GCPD. They're about to shoot the suspect when Batman saves him by attacking the cops. Footage of Batman attacking police officers creates a media frenzy. Meanwhile, Diana, aka Wonder Woman, is back in the Amazon city. She's had a second child with Superman, the infant Jonathan. Her daughter Lara has gone to visit Superman in the Fortress of Solitude, where he sits on a throne encased in a layer of ice. He doesn't respond as she speaks to him, asking, "Why did you let the ants knock you from the sky?" As Lara's about to leave, she notices a distress signal from the bottle city of Kandor. Back in Gotham, Commissioner Yindel is informed that the police are in pursuit of Batman and are likely to catch him. As the patrol cars corner Batman in a blind alley, we see him fight them, but he's overpowered. Yindel arrives on the scene and puts the cuffs on him. As she pulls off the cowl, we see that it's not Bruce Wayne, but Carrie Kelly who's been wearing the suit. The episode closes with Carrie passing out in Yindel's arms, saying, "Bruce Wayne is dead." Tie-in Dark Knight Universe presents The Atom #1. Ray Palmer, the Atom, is in his laboratory thinking about the erstwhile Justice League. He sees the news that Batman has been arrested, and it was a girl who was unmasked. As he thinks about its implications, he's visited by Lara, who's brought Kandor and one of its miniature citizens called Baal with her. Baal says something to Palmer that he's unable to hear. The issue closes with Lara telling him that Baal said they're tired of being small. Book 2. The book opens with Carrie having been in police custody for nearly a month with Yindel trying to get her to talk. Yindel wants to know how Bruce Wayne died, and Carrie finally gives in, saying that he never recovered from a brutal fight 3 years ago and finally passed away. When Yindel asks her what happened to the body, Carrie jokes, saying she ate it. Meanwhile, in Palmer's lab, He explains to Lara that he and Superman had tried to unshrink Kandor once before, but the experiment had failed horribly and they'd given up. His work now is influenced by notes given to him by Baal. His father had his own theories on the shrinking technology and is still inside Kandor. Lara, with her super hearing, flies away as she hears her mother call. Back in Gotham, Carrie is arraigned and on her way back to Blackgate Prison. At a particular point en route, she whistles, setting off a rocket attack on the vehicle she's in. The Batmobile, which is in its tank avatar from The Dark Knight Returns, is waiting nearby and she escapes after evading the police and jumping the car over a drawbridge. Out in the desert, Dr. Palmer has set up his equipment, ready to unshrink the first batch of 1,000 Kryptonians. Praying it works, he pushes the button on a device strapped to his chest and there's a blinding flash. As his sight clears, he sees hundreds of full-grown Kryptonians in front of him. He gasps as he notes that a number of them are dead, seemingly slaughtered. In front of him, in a black and red robe, is a sinister-looking bald man. Baal, now full-size, introduces him as his father, Quar, proclaiming him to be Kandor's savior. Quar immediately turns to Palmer, breaking the device on his chest while pushing the button again, reversing the power, shrinking the atom, and Baal steps on him. Quar addresses the crowd of Kryptonians, revealing himself to be the fanatical polygamous leader of a cult intent on dominating the universe, starting with Earth. It's further revealed that he wanted Kandor's inhabitants to follow him like a god, and that it was only his followers who were unshrunk by Palmer. Quar then picks up Kandor and uses his heat vision to destroy the city and its remaining inhabitants. The episode ends with Carrie returning to the Batcave and walking toward the computer terminal where Bruce Wayne stands, holding a crutch. Tie-in Dark Knight Universe presents Wonder Woman #1. Lara arrives back in the Amazon city to attend a training session with Diana. She doesn't see the point in training with weapons, pointing out that she has Kryptonian powers that Amazons don't. As Diana spars with her, trying to inculcate the Amazon warrior identity and heritage in her daughter, she thrusts a sword at her. Lara allows the sword to land on her chest, shattering it. "I'm Kryptonian," she tells her mother, before flying away once more. Book 3. In the Batcave, Bruce Wayne checks on Carrie as she sleeps and admits to himself that he's simply become too old to go out on patrol with her. As he walks back to the Batcomputer, reports come in of attacks from around the globe. He watches as Quar takes responsibility for the attacks, telling the people of Earth to kneel before him and accept him and his people as gods. He feeds 7 of his children a small pellet each that turn them into the equivalent of nuclear bombs and gives a demonstration by telling one of them to explode in the center of Moscow. He then gives the world a 3-day ultimatum to submit to him. Bruce and Carrie go to the Fortress of Solitude where Bruce cracks the ice layer around Superman with a hammer and tells him the world needs him. Superman remains unresponsive but breaks out of his icy shell when Carrie mentions that his people are about to enslave the Earth. Lara gets manipulated and recruited into the cult by Baal and Quar, who tell her that she's above the humans. The 3-day deadline passes and Quar and his followers break into the Pentagon conference room where global leaders are meeting virtually to debate their actions. As Quar asks them for their answer, Batman hacks into the signals of every screen and tells him to go to hell. As Superman gets there, ready to fight them. The episode closes with Superman being taken aback when Lara calls him a traitor to his race. Tie-in Dark Knight Universe presents Green Lantern #1. On a distant planet where Hal Jordan learns of the Kryptonians' attack on Earth, rushing back as the Green Lantern, he encounters Quar's 3 wives in Egypt, where they're destroying the Sphinx. As the trio talk to him, they realize his power comes from the ring, and one of them uses her heat vision to burn his hand off at the wrist. They throw the severed hand away into the distance and leave him helpless on the desert sand. Book 4. The chapter opens with a brief glimpse of Ray Palmer, the Atom. He isn't dead, but is continuously shrinking, watching helplessly as even atoms grow larger around him. Picking up moments from the previous episode, Superman tries to talk his daughter out of Quar's manipulation. Lara starts to fight him, and Superman refuses to hit back, and she continues to hit him, till finally he finds himself bloody and battered at the doors of his Fortress of Solitude. Quar and his followers arrive, condemning him of treason against Krypton. Quar then encases him in black matter, rendering him motionless, and then melts the entire area, sinking Superman and the fortress under the ice. Quar then returns to Gotham and demands the city turn over Batman to him in 36 hours, or all of Gotham will die. The threat causes violent riots to break out in Gotham, with citizens demanding the police bring him in and that Batman surrender. As Yindel looks down on the crowd, she starts to give up hope. She takes a bottle and gun and heads for the building's rooftop. In the Batcave, Bruce takes medication for his bad leg and hands Carrie a box and a new Batgirl suit before sending her off on a secret mission. Carrie opens the box and sees that it's a pellet of some sort. Batman tells her it's hope. Meanwhile, the Flash runs to Gotham to assist, but a Kryptonian flies in from the opposite direction and breaks his legs, rendering him incapacitated on the streets of Gotham. He's seen by one of the Bat Boys, who's hiding in the sewers below. As Commissioner Yindel sits on the roof, feeling helpless, Batman drops in and tells her to respond to the people's needs. The chapter ends with Ray Palmer still shrinking and falling in the space between molecules. He grabs onto a bond and thinks to himself, maybe I can fix this. Tie-in, Dark Knight Universe presents Batgirl #1. Batgirl is running to the pier being chased by a mob. Her instructions were to get the pellet to the pier. As the mob finally catches up to her, she throws the pellet into the water. Just before it hits the water, we see it being caught by Aquaman as he rises from the water on the back of a giant sea creature. He tells Carrie to get on, and the two disappear into the water. Book 5. The chapter opens on a burning Gotham with rioters running amok. Below the streets, two of Batman's helpers bring an incapacitated Flash to the Batcave. Barry looks down at his twisted legs and asks Batman if he can save them, but Batman doesn't answer. Meanwhile, under the ocean, Batgirl and Aquaman are at the end of their journey as they find the body of Superman still encased in dark matter. The pellet Carrie was given turns out to be a needle that can penetrate the black matter, and Carrie presses it into the black mass. As she steps back, Superman bursts out. Carrie tells him he's been out a couple of days, and Superman tells her it was all the time he needed to search his soul. With a smile, he says, "Do you want to save the world?" indicating that he's now ready to fight again. Back in Gotham, the Kryptonians watch from above as the rioters torch the city. Lara mentions to Quar that she has a baby brother, which piques his interest. In the meantime, Superman and Carrie get back to the Batcave where they see Flash with his legs bandaged, but furiously working the computer. He says he's manipulating weather patterns and tells Clark something's waiting for him. Batman brings out his tank to Gotham to help control the riots. Quar's 36-hour deadline is up and tells his followers to kill all citizens. As the Kryptonians fly down, the clouds burst into rain above them, drenching them in the synthetic kryptonite that Batman seeded the clouds with. The diluted kryptonite weakens them enough for the citizen mob to fight them. The chapter ends as Batman steps out of the tank in a specially armored suit to take on the Kryptonians. Superman flies down to his side, also in an armored suit that protects him from the kryptonite rain from affecting him. He puts an arm around Batman and says, "I got your back." Tie-in, Dark Knight Universe presents Lara #1. Lara spends some time alone with Baal, whose version of fun involves throwing around cars with people still in them. He flirts with her and the two kiss passionately. Book 6. As the Kryptonian rain continues to pour in Gotham, Superman and Batman fight one of Quar's sons. The GCPD and the mob beat the Kryptonians back. Quar himself is beaten down by a squad of Batboys and the footage is streamed across the world. It finally stops raining and Baal, having come in late to the fight, is the only one who wasn't affected. He targets the Batmobile, which is being driven by Carrie, and rips it apart. Carrie jumps free, but Baal chases her into a blind alley. Carrie turns around and uses her slingshot to shoot a kryptonite pellet at Baal, disfiguring half his face. The remaining Kryptonians and Baal fly away to safety. As a wounded Quar is being carried away by his followers, he turns around and uses his heat vision to strike Batman through the chest. Superman catches him as he falls, listening to Bruce's heartbeat slow and then finally stop. A dying Bruce tells him he doesn't want to be taken to a hospital. Tie-in, Dark Knight Universe presents World's Finest #1. As Carrie and two Batboys watch the sunrise over Gotham, Lara comes to confront Carrie. As she and Carrie fight on the rooftops, Wonder Woman intervenes. She binds Lara in the lasso of truth, and Lara accuses her of always holding her back. Lara snaps the lasso, and the two of them exchange blows. As Lara falls down, injured, Wonder Woman offers her a hand. An emotional Lara says she doesn't understand, and Diana replies saying, "I'm your mother, and that bond cannot be shattered." Lara looks at her mother and flies away with tears in her eyes. Book 7. The issue opens with Superman carrying Bruce's body as he flies away from Gotham. As the sun rises over Gotham, Carrie hears reports of Batman's death. She doesn't believe them and tries to get through to Batman over the radio, but there's only silence. Commissioner Yindel walks up to her, handing over the armored helmet Batman was wearing earlier. Meanwhile, Superman continues to fly, crossing seas and deserts. A one-handed man looks up at him as he flies overhead, pausing briefly for a sip of water before continuing his journey across the desert on foot. Deep in the void, Ray Palmer sits on a molecule, trying to fix the device that was attached to his chest. Above the clouds, Quar and his followers, including Carrie and Baal, assemble as he tells them his plan for vengeance. He tells them he's going to kidnap the baby Jonathan from the Amazon city and give him to Baal as a plaything to make up for his now disfigured face. Back in Gotham, Yindel and Batgirl oversee the cleanup and rescue operations. Yindel asks Carrie if the pain and suffering is worth following Batman's principles. The two argue their points but leave it unfinished as Carrie leaves, saying she'll get Yindel a new bat signal so they can stay in touch. Superman finally gets to his destination, a cave in the desert with a Lazarus pit. He lowers Bruce's body into the pit and waits. The pit restores his life and his youth, making Bruce decades younger. In the Amazon city, Carrie steals into Jonathan's room, picking up her brother as Wonder Woman walks in on them. Pointing a sword at her daughter, Diana tells her to put the baby down. Carrie tells her she's come for Jonathan and that she's not alone, referring to the hundreds of Quar's followers in the jungle around the city. The chapter comes to a close as Diana tells Carrie that she isn't alone either, as we see the entire Amazon army assembled and ready for battle. Tie-in Dark Knight Universe presents Strange Adventures number 1. Hal Jordan walks out of the desert into an unknown town. As he gives away his water flask to a beggar, he's taken to an old man who tells him he knows where to find what he's looking for. The old man takes him to meet another man who has Hal's severed hand in a yellow box. Hal steals the box and runs away with men in pursuit. He stumbles and falls, causing the box to open, revealing his severed hand with the Green Lantern ring still on it. The story ends with Hal becoming the Green Lantern once more. Book 8. The episode begins in the Batcave. Despite all the video footage of the battle, Carrie refuses to believe that Batman is dead while Flash tries to convince her to accept it. A rejuvenated Batman and Superman enter the cave and Carrie is thrilled to be reunited with her mentor, noting he's younger and stronger. In the Amazon city, the battle is about to begin, and Wonder Woman calls Batman to inform him that the Kryptonians have declared war on Amazonia, prompting Superman to leave immediately. As she prepares for battle, Diana asks Lara to hand the baby over to her. Lara tells her that Quar's wives are there to collect Jonathan and asks Diana if she trusts her. Diana doesn't answer, but when she goes into battle, baby Jonathan is strapped safely into a papoose on his mother's back. The battle begins, and the Kryptonians realize too late that the Amazons are not susceptible to their powers like humans. Most of Quar's followers are slaughtered, and the few survivors fly away. Lara doesn't participate in the fight, but Quar's wives find her and convince her to come away with them. Superman gets there as the battle ends and is reunited with Diana and baby Jonathan, who remain unharmed. The chapter closes with Flash calling Superman to tell him that Quar and his children, the ones who ingested nuclear bombs, are all at the same location, and the countdown has started. Superman flies away, and Diana tells him she'll meet him there. Tie-in Dark Knight Universe presents Detective Comics number 1. Commissioner Yindel is on her way to apprehend a kidnapping suspect. The 2 SWAT team members with her got a tip from a victim who managed to get away. They go into a building and find a mutilated body and 2 decapitated heads. The sheer brutality of it shocks the SWAT members into a moment of distraction, and they're axed to death by men who dress like the Joker and call themselves Joker Boys. Yindel is taken prisoner and brought before the leader, who turns out to be Joker's old neo-Nazi associate, Bruno. On Bruno's orders, the Joker Boys take Yindel to a table saw to dismember her, when Batman and Batgirl save her at the last moment. As Bruno tries to get away, she shoots Yindel, who in turn shoots back. As Yindel and Bruno lie on the floor bleeding, the Commissioner tells Batman to go save the world, because that's what he does best. Book 9. The final chapter of the story opens in a desert canyon. Batman and Batgirl make their way there as Quar and his remaining followers have congregated, and Quar announces that the people of Earth have disappointed him by not accepting him as their god and will now pay for their mistake. In the void, Ray Palmer has almost finished repairing the shrinking device Quar had broken. As Quar's wives bring Lara back with them, they tell her she's a traitor just like her father for not joining in the fight in Amazonia, and that Quar will punish her for this. As the trio assault Lara, Green Lantern arrives. He tells Lara to go, leaving him to deal with the wives. There's a blinding flash of green light as he destroys them. As Batman arrives at the canyon, he uses the sonics on his Batmobile to attract hundreds of bats from the nearby caves, who fly into the air, swarming Quar and his followers. In their panic, they use their heat vision to destroy the bats, but end up killing most of their own in the crossfire. Having suffered losses once again, the Kryptonians lose faith in Quar, calling him a madman. As they fly away, Quar and his sons use their heat vision to kill them all. Lara arrives in time to watch this. As Batman and Batgirl are about to go fight Quar and his children, Superman arrives and stops them from getting involved, saying, "Leave this to me. I'm not going to let you die after I brought you back to life. The world needs a Batman." Superman engages Quar and his remaining children, and for the first time, fights them in the calculating way Batman would. Batman realizes Superman has been holding back his true fighting abilities all these years, and admires his technique. A defeated Quar tells his children to go nuclear, and Batman realizes that Quar had chosen the canyon strategically on a fault line, where 6 simultaneous nuclear detonations would split the Earth. As Superman, Batman, Batgirl, and Lara helplessly watch Quar's children start to glow and heat up for the detonation, the Atom appears, having fixed the machine, and shrinks the children, rendering the explosions minuscule and harmless. Quar, who was standing at a distance, starts to detonate himself, but Lara zips in and flies him into space, where she throws him into the sun. As the story comes to an end, we see that 2 months have passed since the defeat of the Kryptonians. In the Batcave, Batman is at the computer, searching for Superman, who's been missing since the events at the canyon. Carrie comes to him, asking if he's ready to go on patrol. Her suit is now the same color as Batman's, and she tells him that she's Batwoman now, no longer a protege, but an equal partner. Tie-in Dark Knight Universe Presents Action Comics #1. The final tie-in brings the master race to a conclusion where we see Batman, Batwoman, Aquaman, Flash, Green Lantern, the Atom, and Wonder Woman all continuing in their duties as protectors. Superman tries to explain his love for humanity to Lara as he dresses up in his Clark Kent persona. He admits to her that he was wrong in keeping himself isolated in the Fortress of Solitude. He says, despite its faults and fears, the joy of sharing humanity is the greatest thing I've ever experienced. The issue closes with Lara in civilian clothes, putting on a pair of glasses as the two step out, saying, "Teach me." The final story in the Dark Knight saga is The Golden Child, which centers around Superman's son, Jonathan Kent. Dark Knight Returns, The Golden Child. The story opens with a young Jonathan Kent watching Clark and Lara talking about his powers, some of which vary from Clark's and Lara's powers. Clark tells Lara that they'll need to teach him, and Lara agrees, adding that they'll also need to learn from John when the time comes. As Clark and Lara leave the apartment, Jonathan listens in on the city around him. He hears the city of Metropolis laugh, argue, and complain. The story then jumps forward a few years, and we see a slightly older John hovering above Metropolis with Lara, looking down at the scene of a car accident. As people gather below, John comments that there are so many of them, and Lara tells John that humans breed like vermin and make a mess wherever they go, getting hurt and dying. John points out that humans care for each other as well, working hard to keep each other alive. But Lara replies by saying all humans do is breed more, eat more, and consume resources, that she doesn't understand the point of protecting them and saving them because human lives are pointless. The duo then come across a political rally, which has turned violent with a mob dressed as Jokers attacking peaceful protesters. Batwoman enters the scene with a mob of Bat Boys, spraying the rioters with a pink foam to immobilize them. As the remaining Jokers run away, John looks at Lara and says things are gonna get very bad very soon. Batwoman, Lara, and John go to the Bat Bunker, a heavily fortified building on the side of a cliff that's completely off books. Lara tells Carrie that she feels Darkseid was behind the trouble earlier, telling her that if Darkseid ever finds them, he'll unleash horrors. Carrie tells her that she's sick of Lara's bad attitude and that she's prepared to fight back. She connects to the internet, catching up on the news, noting that it's a mess out there with a divisive election coming up. Carrie tells Lara that while Superman and Batman are needed elsewhere, they'll need to handle the mess. Lara pushes back against the idea of taking orders from her, but relents when Carrie tells her she has no choice because Lara doesn't understand anything about the election, nor does she have any idea of what to do about Darkseid. Meanwhile, Darkseid and Joker plan to interfere in the election by seeding chaos on the streets, with Darkseid's reasoning that law-abiding citizens will cower in their homes, while his agents of chaos will flock to the polls, voting for his puppet politician. Batwoman breaks up yet another riot, this time with Lara's help, and the two of them interrogate one of the Jokers about his bosses. The man gives up the Joker's location after Lara snaps his leg. John and Lara arrive outside Darkseid's building. John zips into the room, grabbing the Joker children who work the computers, and Lara tells him to kill them, but he doesn't. Darkseid doesn't move as Lara pours in her heat vision, causing the building to explode. Carrie and the Batboys arrive at the scene of the destruction. They hear the demon chuckle and know he still lives. Darkseid then turns into a large black cloud and tells Lara to join him in his war against the humans. In a hypnotic voice, he tells them that he's the best friend they ever had, one who's here to show them they can do anything they want without fear and pain. Carrie and the Batboys find themselves under his spell, and Lara tells Darkseid he's insane, prompting Darkseid to shoot an Omega beam at her. Lara ducks the beam as it winds around, trying to hit her. She knows that just one touch of it will be enough to undo her. She shouts at John to give it everything he's got, and John, who's taken position behind Darkseid, blasts him with his blue heat vision as Lara guides the Omega beam back to Darkseid, resulting in him getting struck by it, and he explodes in a blinding flash, leaving behind a large crater. As Darkseid's helmet falls to the ground, Lara spits on it, thinking the beast is dead. Carrie, who was knocked out by the blast, comes to and jumps into the crater to inspect the site and confirm the kill. It then starts to rain blood, and Lara says Darkseid will return to wreak his vengeance on all humanity, but John says that he's not after revenge. He's coming for me, he tells Lara as they look up at the sky. Sometime later, Darkseid is reborn in the stars and makes his way back to Earth. Even as his arrival causes tsunamis, he thinks to himself that before he conquers worlds, he wants to adopt 2 children, referring to Lara and John. Back in Gotham, Batwoman chases the Joker and his men through the streets as they try to get away in a car. Lara causes the car to crash and chases Joker into an arcade. A fight ensues and Batwoman captures the Joker. The city's then hit by a firestorm as buildings explode and Darkseid rises from the smoke, calling out to Lara to submit to him. Lara comes to fight him, but he hits her with the maelstrom which surrounds her, and she falls under his control. Jonathan appears and Darkseid tells her they'll make him a great king and will be groomed for his dark destiny. He tells John to bear witness dangerous as she becomes a weapon to kill worlds. John tells him that she's not going to kill anybody except maybe Darkseid, challenging him to fire away. Darkseid seethes with anger at the young boy and, pushing Lara away, fires the Omega Blast at John. John absorbs the blast, combines it with his own, and blasts it back at Darkseid as a new power called the Neutron Vision. Darkseid falls to the ground on his knees, but gets up again, grabbing John and trying to squeeze him to death. John disappears in a flash of blinding light, and Darkseid hears the boy's voice in his head as John starts popping veins inside his brain. John then comes out of Darkseid and enters his sister Lara, who hovers nearby. As Darkseid shoots at her, John tells his sister to stay calm and that he's got her. He tells her they're going away now to make things right. Darkseid's blast passes through Lara as her body disappears with John inside her, leaving Darkseid on his knees at the bottom of the crater. As Darkseid tries to get up, he's hit by a rock on the head. Touching his forehead, he sees that he's bleeding. John has rendered immortal. He sees a mob of humans approaching, led by Batwoman, who tells him his stupid fake election is over. The story comes to a close with the mob getting closer as Batwoman tells him that they're thinking for themselves now, that they're free, and that's why they'll always win. Marvelous verdict. The Dark Knight Saga is undoubtedly one of the most influential story arcs of the Caped Crusader and the definitive source material for the Batman films in the last 20 years. Miller deserves credit for having transformed the character into the much darker hero we know today, while also making the stories more gritty and real. While opinions are divided on the quality of the different storylines and plots, our choice for the top four would be Batman Year One, The Dark Knight Returns, The Dark Knight Strikes Again, and The Master Race. These are the ones that we thought stood out in terms of the plot and storytelling. They also maintain a continuity that readers can easily follow from one to the next. So, whether you're a Batman fan or simply a superhero fan, this is a series that we'd recommend you add to your reading list.